And I said, honey, I want you to have a seat right here. I made her a cup of coffee. I said, I just watched a documentary. I'm absolutely horrified. If you see what I see, we got to change our plans today. We're not going to plan our weddings. We're instead going to go to the store and we got some shopping to do. If you think I'm crazy, I will pack all this up, put it all back, and we can go about our day as planned.
Welcome back to Fishing Without Bait, a lifetime without definitive expectations, where we help people explode into their lives through full impact mindfulness. We're going to continue our conversation with Craig Goldberg, an innovator and an entrepreneur of InHarmony.com. So I don't know if you can see this tattoo, if you can read it.
Abracadabra.
So when you
No
think of it,
regrets.
when you think of abracadabra, what comes to your mind, Craig?
A magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat.
Making something appear. Actually, it comes from the Bible's Jesus time. It's Aramaic, and roughly what it translates into, I speak what I create what I speak. So 80% of cognitive behavioral therapy is about changing the language in the way you speak to yourself. The cool kids call it manifestation or vision boards. It's been around since dust.
That it has. That it has. How many thoughts do we have a day?
Sometimes I'll do an exercise about I'll have people on an index card, just for 1 minute, I'll have them put that down a slash mark for every thought they have. And I remind them that even thinking about having a thought is a thought.
Indeed, it is. It's something like I've heard it as low as 40,000, as high as 90,000 thoughts per day, 90% of which are repeated from the day before, 90% of which are negative.
Our minds
Those statistics.
Our minds tend to drift toward negative outcomes.
Well, and the reason for that is the ego, right? Fear comes from keeping this vessel alive. And the way to do that is by thinking about all the things that could go wrong. We're looking for the negativity in the pattern, not the positivity in the pattern. Are you familiar with the term pronoia?
Yes.
One of my favorite words. I've got an unbelievably intense case of pronoia. For those that aren't familiar, paranoia is the world is out to get me. Pronoia is the world is unfolding for me. And I try and come back to that as often as possible. What's happening right now? What is the perceived problem at hand? Why is this happening? What in it is happening for me? What is it to my benefit? Where is the light? Why is this beneficial to me? And I suffer from a pretty extreme case of pronoia.
Well, what you're describing is the Stoic philosophy of amor fati, which is embrace fate.
Indeed. Indeed.
So we explore a lot of opportunities, and it sounds like we're talking to a kindred spirit with you.
Indeed.
When we were talking about the vibroacoustic therapy practitioner, which you're described as, could you say a little bit more about that? That's fascinating.
Sure. So vibroacoustic, vibration, acoustic sound. So I'm a sound and vibration therapy practitioner. And the reason I keep that in my title is because I'm quite literally still working with clients, working with myself, working with my family. I use the science and research that I've studied, which is on the formal body of research called vibroacoustic therapy, which goes back formally about 45 years to the late 1970s, when a gentleman named Olav Skill in Norway began to study sound and frequency and its impact on our physiology, our neurology, our anatomy, and what impact we can have on our nervous system using sound and vibration. And as I know, you've spoken about not just with the words in music, but the music itself. Words are powerful. Music is powerful. And whatever music moves you, moves you. And it's very unique to each one of us as to what we resonate with. There is meditative music, like the music that I have playing in the background now. There are music meditations, which are found in our app, which take you on a specific journey with a start and an end. And then there's pop music, reggae, hip hop, house music. There are many different genres, and whatever genre you love, and that moves you. Vibroacoustic therapy is the study of sound and frequency and how it impacts us. And used in a positive light, used in the right way, sound and music and vibration can help to reset the nervous system. It can help to fend off that fight or flight response, that survival mode, that sympathetic nervous system response, and start and kick off the chemical cascades associated with the parasympathetic or calm and relaxed state of being. And far too many of us are walking around in a stressed and anxious survival mode nervous system response. And when you're in that, and I say survival mode instead of fight or flight or, or sympathetic nervous system response, because when I say survival mode, that immediately, I think, annotates the importance and the survival mode. It's like it's a different set of priorities. When I'm in survival mode, I'm literally in survival mode. Like your body turns off maintenance tasks. It turns off potentially turns off rational thinking, potentially turns off your immune system, your reproductive organs, your digestion, and it diverts that energy, which are maintenance tasks, to survival mode, to keeping your vessel alive. And if you're in fight or flight for a couple hours in the afternoon while you tend to a specific issue or scenario, great. But if you're chronically in that sympathetic nervous system response, that survival mode, day after day, week after week, month after month, you can find yourself in a world of trouble with lots of dis-ease surrounding you and a body that is probably not functioning optimally. And that includes mentally, emotionally, physically, nutritionally. And that just leads to a cascade of problems. So, vibroacoustic therapy is really designed and about calming and relaxing the nervous system, helping you to ease into spend more time in that parasympathetic nervous system response.
So, what you're talking about is the sympathetic nervous system setting off the adrenal glands, which pump the cortisol through your body, which set off the flight, flight, or freeze. And what you're talking about is somehow activating the vagus nerve system, which activates the
Right.
parasympathetic nervous system, which I tell people is like the governor on an engine that slows things down.
That's right. It does. I mean, look, we all know when we're calm and relaxed, there's really not too much you can throw at us that's going to give us a bad day or take us off our top, taking us off our tilt, our giving us a kilter. But yeah, when you're calm and relaxed, you can handle what life throws at you. When you're stressed and anxious, just about anything can throw you off.
Well, anxiety can be described. There's many definitions of it, of anticipation of apprehension about what may or may not occur. I'm
Mhm.
particularly interested in the application of string theory according to the vibrations, according to Sanskrit meditations, which may not necessarily be the words, but the tonation.
Look, string theory and the quantum field, I mean, we're just learning more and more about its impact. Um, this entire physical plane that we are in is basically comprised of vibration. Everything is vibration. This desk that I'm looking at right now, the microphone that you can see here in the camera, the headphones I'm wearing, every piece of my skin at some level is vibrating and moving. And we remember this from seventh grade chemistry. Protons, neutrons, and electrons that are all spinning. Those electrons are spinning around a neutron, and it's all vibrating. It appears solid in this world, but on a molecular level, um, this is all vibrating. On the quantum level, which we're just starting to piece together, these particles um, are constantly moving through these strings propagated in space. And string theory is something that's very interesting to me. I mean, we're obviously learning more and more about this as we can look smaller and smaller and more finite. But it's very interesting to me how the universe is built of these systems, of these interactions of matter. And yeah, not sure exactly where you wanted to go with it, but it is something that's very interesting to me.
Well, it's very interesting to all of us. I'm particularly interested in when I was listening to some of your previous podcasts that you've done, how the sound and how your meditation seating and all the things that uh, you have that can help people, particularly, and I think it would be of tremendous help to the autistic and the neurodivergent mind.
Absolutely. Look, I mean, we all know somebody on the spectrum. And we all know somebody that cognitively is not developed at the same rate or the same speed as others. And oftentimes, when you have any type of um, mental deficiency or even sensory deficiency, um, you do know that your other senses tend to get amplified. And this is across a broad scale. Um, we've got a number of folks that work with autism and work therapeutically with people that have autism where sound, music, and vibration has been very calming. I'm not an expert in this field by any means. However, we work with a number of people that use our technology that are experts in that field. And what they find is, especially starting on a low setting, low vibration, low volume, and beginning to play our music meditations, that it's very soothing and very calming. We've had um, we've had folks that um, were stuttering and out of control with how they speak, get on our technology and almost immediately go silent. Right. So like sound, music, vibration, it can have a profound impact on an overstimulated brain and helping it to calm and relax and allowing it to steady itself. And we see that a lot in the autistic community. A very powerful tool for that community,
Well,
indeed.
whenever I dived into this, what I hope to dive into a little bit more, and I'm going to turn some people on, some of my patients, that the sights, sounds, and images of life just overwhelm them, and they shut down and they disassociate. If they had
Yeah.
somewhere where they could detox away from these things, that would be wonderful.
I'll tell you, I'm personally not on the spectrum, but I absolutely suffer from anxiety and stress and depression at times. People will tell me that my outlook on life is positive and good, and yet it's very easy for me to get caught up in what will be. And I use my music meditations regularly to help calm and relax the mind. I do it through my relaxation furniture. I do it through my headphones plugged into my phone at times. I do it. I don't. Yes, I do have them here. I do them through my AirPods that I keep on me just about all the time. I invested in the AirPod Pros. The transparency mode on these things is magical. And when I travel by air at least once a month, speaking engagements, events around the country, travel with my family. And when I travel, I put on one of my music meditations, which I've downloaded through a Google subscription. I have 11-hour extended music meditations for free on our YouTube channel. There's
Mm.
15 of them that are there. I will download them to my phone so I can use it off Wi-Fi. I will put one of these on. I will put both of these in my ear with transparency mode on so I can still hear the outside world. And in the background, I have running these beautiful tones that help to soothe and calm my mind that I listen to every day. From the moment I wake up, they're playing through my Sonos sound system here at the house in every room of the house. So when you walk in my home, you're immediately grounded and taken down into that meditative experience, that meditative mind.
So you're not a overnight success. And I always like to talk about moments of clarity and the way we got into situations. And if you would care to, you can share with us whatever you feel comfortable with about your reasoning, and that was a wonderful reason for getting involved in this when your wife became ill.
Yeah. That was the catalyst when we start to reflect back on what happened. So about 12 years ago, my wife got sick. Doc after doc, nobody could tell us what was wrong. Test after test, specialist after specialist, everything came back negative. In the end, it wound up being gluten. This
Hmm.
pesky little ingredient that we know so much about today.
Hmm.
The symptoms I think are worth mentioning, especially if we're talking
Please.
details. Um, so my wife is Turkish. She has beautiful olive skin. She was starting to break out on her face. She was all of her lymph nodes from her waist up were swollen,
Ah.
not just the ones in the neck, but behind the head, behind the neck, under the arm. I mean, they were like little soft, they were like marbles underneath her skin, rock hard. We took a biopsy, came back negative. Um, and the last symptom, which was ultimately the kicker and the giveaway, every Saturday around 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, she would lose her voice. And And it wasn't until we were actually at a festival or Burning Man, I forget where we were. I think we were at Lightning in a Bottle, and my wife had lost her voice. And our friend Roxy, we were hanging out, and my wife was whispering, and she said, "Do you lose your voice often?" And she could barely get out every Saturday at 3 o'clock. And Roxy said, "Put that beer down. It's gluten." And she said I was the same exact way. And my wife, being Turkish and Mediterranean, she's always eating bread, pasta, bulgur wheat. We loved pizza, and we always had a beer in our hand. Not always like every day, but like we would work a full-time job and then we would get off at 5 o'clock and we'd go to have a drink at the beach. Thursday night, we'd go out, we'd have a lot of beers that night. The next day, we'd work a half day, cut out on Friday, go to the track, and we'd have a beer in our hand for 10, 12 hours. That night, we'd go out, same thing, just this slow roll of having a beer. And by Saturday, you throw on top of that a couple dinners with bread and pasta and bulgur wheat, and my wife's body was so inflamed that it began to shut down. It was so inflamed, the inflammatory response, hence all of her lymph nodes being swollen, hence literally the poison from the gluten trying to get out of her body through the skin and losing her voice as her throat became inflamed. So, 72 hours after her last morsel of gluten, all of her symptoms went away overnight,
Hmm.
never came back.
Hmm.
And this led to a deep dive into really understanding how the human body works. So, my wife and I, we've been together for 15 years. We eat the same diet. We eat out of the same fridge, obviously. So my wife gave up gluten. I gave up gluten. Over the next 6 months, my wife got increasingly better every single day, and I got increasingly worse. And it was really odd.
You got
So I'm sitting
increasingly
in,
worse.
I did, yeah, for 9 months after 9 months after giving up gluten, I had a runny nose, low grade fever, cough that would come and go. Um, I would break out in night sweats. It was attached, obviously, to low grade fever that would come and go. And I, in general, just was not well. And I could not kick it. Um, After doing a lot of research, I researched like I'm sure a lot of listeners do through Dr. Google, and I read an article and then I pick out all the words that I don't understand and I search those, and before you know it, I've got three or four windows open with a half a dozen to a dozen tabs on each, diving deep into each topic. And I'm searching, immune response, gluten. I'm searching, my symptoms. I'm just really trying to figure out what's going on so that I can make a case to move back. Doctors didn't know what was going on. They said it was just a head cold, a virus of some kind, and that I'd be fine. So over the course of it took about 9 months for those symptoms to suppress themselves, and then I came to the realization that I was detoxing. My body was no longer distracted by the inflammatory response being caused by the gluten, that it was detoxifying itself. And these were detox pathways opening up and pressing out toxic load.
Hmm.
Really
Wow.
remarkable. So over the course of the next year, I was sitting in bed with that Sunday morning. I wake up early. My wife is a night owl. I love the mornings. I'm sitting in bed while my wife is sleeping next to me, and I'm on my phone just doing some research on the immune system, and over and over and over again, genetically modified food keeps coming up. And I didn't know how they genetically modify food, so I began to read about that, and I got horrified. I mean, I was horrified, just absolutely horrified. And I got tired of reading. So I said, you know what? I want to watch a documentary. Let me search for a documentary on genetically modified food. And I found Genetic Roulette.
Genetic roulette.
Genetic Roulette. And I went outside and I put it on in the living room with a cup of coffee and my laptop. And they start talking. And I mean, they are just dropping truth bomb after truth bomb after truth bomb. And eventually I'm like, this can't be true. So I sit there with my laptop and I took copious notes. I still have it. I'm happy to share the Evernote that I wrote.
Well, please.
Um, but I am basically taking notes on the names and the claims that they're making. And then at the very end of the movie, if you don't know how they genetically modify food, it's really horrifying. All I can say is don't eat genetically modified food. It's not worth it. and it is really crippling to the gut and to the way the body operates. It's straight up poison. You're eating more glyphosate. Anyway, that's a totally separate conversation, but it can be debilitating mentally, emotionally, physically, relationally, financially. I mean, there are lots of different ways that it can affect how your body operates. And I'm sitting there taking notes. At the end of it, they put up a couple of of percentages. And at the time, this is again 12 years ago, 96% of the soy we consumed was genetically modified, and I think it was 87 or 88% of the corn that we were consuming was genetically modified. And that's all fine and dandy, but what I didn't know was all of the derivatives from corn and soy that we eat as mixers and emulsifiers in foods that we buy out of a box or a bag. And you'll see it. It's dextrose, melted dextrose, right? It's all of these different corn starches, corn sugars, you name it. Don't even get me started on seed oils. But this began my deep dive into really understanding how the body operates, what vitamins, minerals, and nutrients we need, how toxic the world around us is, from what we put in our mouth, what we put in our skin, and what we allow to be kept in the air around us, and how most Americans are simply dying from death from a thousand cuts. We are being exposed to toxicity in everything that we do, from the park bench that we sit on that has a rust-oleum on it, to the paints in our houses that are off gassing, to the sheets and the dyes and the cottons that we sleep in 8, 10 hours a night, you name it. And any one of these by themselves, not a big deal. But as you start to layer these on top of each other, that's before you poison yourself from the inside out in the things that you're consuming. And by the way, it's not hard to eat a clean diet. If it came from the earth, eat more of it. It comes from a box, eat less of it. Um, and I became horrified at exactly how we were poisoning ourselves. Um, I started traveling the world, teaching, training, and educating on the efficacy of essential oils. I gave up deodorant. Once I started to learn, I literally that morning when I was sitting there watching that documentary, I wrote down the list of these 90 some odd soy lecithin, like these. Which, by the way, if you're seeing these things on the back of a dextrose, dextrin, maltodextrose, maltodextrin, corn syrup, cornstarch, high fructose corn syrup, all of these are derivatives. Unless specified as organic, it is a derivative of a genetically modified food, corn or soy. And again, it could be less than 5% of what you're eating, but nonetheless, you're eating it and consuming it in a multitude of different things, and it builds up in the body. So I took that list, I opened up every book, every cupboard that we had, and I start reading the labels, ingredient labels of our foods in our kitchen. And anything that had a derivative in it, I put on the kitchen counter. And my wife woke up an hour and a half, 2 hours later. I'd watched the movie. I had already torn the kitchen apart, and I still left all the cupboards open. And my wife, I'll never forget, she wipes her eyes. She's wearing a nightie, and she just looked at me and she went, what's going on? And I said, honey, I want you to have a seat right here. I made her a cup of coffee. I said, I just watched a documentary. I'm absolutely horrified. If you see what I see, we got to change our plans today. We're not going to plan our weddings. We're instead going to go to the store and we got some shopping to do. If you think I'm crazy, I will pack all this up, put it all back, and we can go about our day as planned. And of course, within 5 minutes of watching what I watched, she was like, this guy that used to work at Monsanto, he's now at the FDA. And this guy over here that's like, it was all these connections through our government and exactly how. And I looked all of it up and I verified all of it. And sure enough, I see this guy on LinkedIn who used to be the CEO of Monsanto. And I look on the FDA's website and he is now the, you know, whatever role he's got. And it was pretty horrifying. So, needless to say, we cleaned up our act. We started to take time to really understand everything we put in our mouth, everything we put on our skin, everything we keep in the air around us. And part of that meant no colognes, no perfume, no deodorant, because 12 years ago we didn't have nearly as many natural options as we have today.
Well, I've been using Thai stick for years as deodorant. I find that it's great. And there's a reason why there's many items that are produced in the United States that aren't permitted to be sold in Europe.
Yeah.
I worked with a psychiatrist from Pakistan by the name of Zafar Chaudhry, wonderful human being, and his advice was look at every label, and if you can't pronounce the words, it doesn't belong in your body.
Absolutely. More than five ingredients, chances are you're not going to want any of that in your body either. I mean, there are definitely some blanket general ways that you can do it, but for the next few years, going shopping, food shopping, was a 2 or 3 hour ordeal. We would literally sit in the aisle and we would be Googling and searching for these different ingredients to understand what they were, where they were sourced, where they likely came from. And even that's a horrifying practice.
So how does that?
Um,
How was that? What type of impact does that had on you, Carl, and your Craig? Excuse me, and your wife and your daughter?
I think a profound. I mean, look, my daughter actually just came home from school with my wife, and it's amazing. I was recently asked if I can change one thing in my life, what would I change? And I actually said I wouldn't change anything because it all led me to this point right now. I said I do wish that I learned lessons earlier in life. I do wish that I had some of the knowledge I had now earlier in life. And I immediately began thinking about my daughter, who is now 4 years old, and she was fighting off a head cold, as children who play in a petri dish all day often do. And my wife said to my daughter, Harmony, what do germs not like? And she said, green juice. And she said, and what do germs feed on? And she said, sugar. And and my wife said, what do we eat? And she said, organic fruits and vegetables. This is my daughter. She's 4 years old,
Yeah.
right? Like the power and the strength of your environment and tending to that environment, I think, is unprecedented. And obviously, my daughter doesn't have I mean, she did at one point have a choice. That's a different conversation. But um, like how lucky she's going to be to have the knowledge that we have now that we're downloading into her every single day about what we choose to eat and not eat, um, and the life that she's going to get to live because of it. And she'll eventually make her own choices, and she can choose to eat whatever she wants, but she'll hopefully have the science and the research done to understand what that means and what she's putting in her body. But the better the fuel, the better the performance, no doubt.
We'll be continuing our conversation with our delightful, insightful guest, Craig Goldberg of IamInHarmony.com on our next podcast. And here's your free prescription: fruits, nuts, and vegetables. Unplug your television and take up fishing. And for a truly mindful experience, we fish without bait. Do a kindness for yourself and do a kindness for another. Forgive yourself and forgive another. Till all are free, namaste, my friends.
Please check out our website at fishingwithoutbait.com, where you can listen to the show, comment on our discussions, and find out where you can subscribe to our podcast. If you're interested in flying the colors of Fishing Without Bait, click the shop icon on our website. We have clothing, mugs, cell phone cases, and so much more. Show the world that you fish without bait. This show is a member of the Sorgatron Media Podcast Network. Find out more at sorgatronmedia.com.